Welcome back. Today we finish off with the front clip and get after the box.
Yeah, normally we'd try to save the special bolts that hold the box to the frame. But in our case, or in Shorty's case, half of those bolts have been replaced over the years with regular hardware, and you can only buy them as a kit. So instead of trying to mess around, trying to remove the bolts carefully, looks like we're gonna just cut them off.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a job for the death wheel. Darcy, you've got a few experiences with grinders, hey?
Yeah, well, yeah, a number of years ago, it was a beautiful summer day. I'd been cutting metal outside in the shop. In fact, I rolled my bench out to the pad out front so I wouldn't get a bunch of dust in the shop. And when I thought I was done for the day, I switched out of my work clothes, and so I had my shorts and my sandals on. And as I'm cleaning up around the shop, I noticed that there's one more piece of metal I'd forgot to cut. So in a moment of absolute stupidity, I just got the grinder going again. I locked on the the trigger lock. And I just started cutting. Well, guaranteed, the thing kicked out of my hands. I watched the grinder come down, go through my foot and onto the floor. My first reaction was to chase the grinder to get it to turn off. And at that moment, I looked back and I saw this huge blood trail everywhere. Now, of course, to add to this, I'm home alone. My wife and daughter were out for the afternoon. So I limped back to my toolbox, grabbed a roll of shop towels, wrapped them around my foot, got some duct tape, wrapped that around as well, limped out to my truck, used my left foot on the gas pedal to get to the nearest hospital to get stitched up. Now, my wife and daughter were completely unaware of this, and they came home and went out back to see how I was doing. And my wife said it was like walking into a crime scene. So, lesson learned: respect the death wheel.
Agreed. But there's actually some people that remove the guards from the grinders.
Let's get to work.
Okay, we're back at it on Project Shorty. We're 2.5 hours into disassembling the front end on this truck. If it was one person doing the work, it would probably be about 4.5, maybe 5 hours doing it yourself, trying to manhandle the pieces. It's always nicer to have two people. It's safer, more efficient. Everything that we did here was done with basic hand tools, nothing special, something that tools people would have in their garage. The inner fenders and front fenders, some of the attachment points were heavily corroded. Took a little more effort to cut that apart, and we did have to cut some of it apart because we just couldn't get in there with drills or grinders. The parts that we removed, we deemed them not reusable. They were too far gone. So we just set them aside. We're pretty confident we've got the replacements on our parts truck. We did notice when we took the front fenders off that the rad support wasn't firmly attached. As you can see, there's a lot of slop here. That should be rigid. When you take those fenders off, it should be sitting upright. So we're going to have to get in there and see what's going on. Either maybe the mounts are rusted or they didn't tighten up the bolts if they did body work on it previously. Who knows? Today we're going to remove the inner fender liners and the rad support, and then we're going to be continuing to remove things so we can separate the cab from the frame. A lot of the wiring and hoses that were attached to the inner fenders, we loosened those off and just placed them on top of the engine just to make way for removing parts and ultimately the cab coming off the frame.
Well, we're trying to get this the wood out of the bed because we're going to have this back outside again, sitting for maybe a month or more before we're ready to bring it in and start doing the metal work. So rather than have this rotting wood fill up with snow, and then if it warms up and melts, and it might create more work for us. So we're going to try and just get this wood out of here now, and then we can assess the rest of the bed, make sure all the channels are in good shape. But the problem is that these bolts have probably been in here since day one. They're totally corroded. We try to spin the nut off on the other side, and the carriage bolt is supposed to lock into the strips that hold the wooden floor down, but they just spin out. And so now we've got to go and we've got to clean up each nut on the other side and each bolt on this side. And then we put a tack weld down to hold it in place, and then we can spin the nuts off. So it's a little time consuming, but it's probably the only way we're going to get this done. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Cutting the 8 bolts off the box wasn't that bad. You know, as long as you take your time, wear your proper safety equipment, and respect the death wheel, it all went pretty smooth.
Yeah, it did. And the lifting the box was easy with the gantry. We picked this one up off of Marketplace for around $400 Canadian. The electric winch, which is usually a little too small for the work, was fine for lifting the box off.
Yeah, we have to see about upgrading that at some point in time.
Yeah.
Once the box was off, we decided that we want to take what was left of the wooden floor and remove it because the box is probably going to have to be stored outside in the elements for the next month and a half before we actually start doing some body work. So we thought it'd be a good idea just to get that wood out of there to prevent any further corrosion.
Yeah, it made sense until we discovered that the bolts holding the metal strips weren't going without a fight.
Yeah, these are like about 16 carriage bolts, and they're supposed to lock into the metal strip. But of course, the rest of the bolt and the nuts were so corroded that they just started spinning. And so that meant that every head of the carriage bolt had to be cleaned away from the rust and the paint using a wire wheel, and then putting a tack weld, welding the head of the bolt to the metal strip, and then removing it. And I think half the cases, the bolts just broke right off, but it seemed to take forever.
Yeah, it did. It was a lot of work. In the next episode, we tackle the cab. We'll loosen all the connections, and hopefully the cab bolts are easier to deal with than the box bolts were.
Hopefully.